Hey, good evening, everyone. We're going to get going. I am Seth Grimes with the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. Thank you all for joining us this evening for this forum presented by the Transportation Safety Allies about autonomous vehicles in the District of Columbia. So, um, we're going to get started. I will lay out our agenda, which is as follows. We're going to have a welcome and introduction. I'm doing the welcome right now. We're going to call on Councilmember Charles Allen, who chairs the District of Columbia Council's Transportation and Environment Committee, to talk about the bill that he has introduced on autonomous vehicles and for-hire vehicles included. We're going to hear briefly from Director Jonathan Rogers of the Department of For-Hire Vehicles, and then get perspectives from the sponsors of the hosts of tonight's program, the Transportation Safety Allies. And then we're going to move to listening to hear your thoughts about the legislation, your concerns about autonomous vehicles, operations in the District of Columbia, and so on. And then we'll talk about next steps. So I'm going to offer some background about autonomous vehicles. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to stop the share and call on Sam Turnbull to talk about the organizations that are sponsoring this evening, the Transportation Safety Allies. So stop the share and turn it over to Sam.
Thanks, Seth, and thank you so much to WABA for doing all of the infrastructure to host
You
this.
need to
It's much.
unmute.
Oh, can you not hear me?
Sam, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
And if you've used Microsoft Teams recently, you need to change your speaker to not Microsoft Teams.
I think can folks hear me? Am I good? Am I heard? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Sam. I'm the
Must be
legislative
my
director for the Trial Lawyers Association of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. And just to give you some information about the groups that are here tonight, this is a broad coalition of very diverse groups that came together around a shared interest in making DC's streets safer, particularly for people who walk, roll, bicycle, and use transit. Um, recently came together around legislation around DC's required motor vehicle insurance minimums, um, and identified the rollout of autonomous vehicles as an opportunity for some coordinated advocacy. um, tonight's Our goals for tonight are primarily to hear from you, to give our all of our organizations a chance to hear from folks from all coming from all different perspectives on this. Uh, as I'm sure you're aware, if you're attending this webinar, that folks can feel very extremely against AVs and very for AVs, and there's a lot of in between. And so we wanted to hear kind of what that in between looks like. Where do people have questions? How do folks feel about the legislation as it stands? And what do we need to focus on in terms of making it better? Because that's what this process is all about. Thank you, Seth. Oh, and you know, if you would like to use the chat, you're welcome to do that. You can share your name, where you live. If you're attached to an organization, feel free to share that too. And then we can use that as a way to continue some conversations if we don't have time to raise everybody up to the speaking. I'll pass it back.
Great. Thank you, Sam. So, our focus this evening is a particular piece of legislation that Councilmember Allen has introduced. But in order to provide context, I'll give some very quick background, the items that you see on the screen. While we're doing that, I'm going to launch a poll that will ask you to respond about how you feel about for-hire automated vehicles, so-called robo-taxis on DC streets. I hope you are seeing this poll, and I'd invite you, I think you are because people are responding, to respond to your attitude. This is a bit of level setting on our part. So, by way of background, I'm going to go over what's on the slide that you should be
Yeah.
seeing.
Hey,
Mayor
Seth,
Bowser,
you're showing the Google Doc and not the slides.
ugh, I'm,
It's
I'm,
okay.
I am inept here.
You got
So
it. You're
that's
doing a lot. You launched a poll, you're sharing your screen, you're doing great.
okay. That is the wrong. This is weird. Okay. Why am I not seeing this? Please indulge me for a moment here while I figure out what's going on with this share.
Give everybody plenty of time to answer our poll. It's just a little temperature check to see kind of where folks
Okay,
stand.
here we go. All right, let's hope that you're seeing background slide now. Yes. I mean, this is one of these things where I've done this many, many, many times, but there's always something that happens. So Mayor Bowser established an autonomous vehicle working group in 2018. And there was a study that was issued with some recommendations by that working group. Things progressed to where there was a council legislation, Autonomous Vehicle Testing Program Amendment Act of 2020, that amended in 2012 legislation and the act in 2020 established a testing program. There are two providers according to DDOT, that are actively testing in DC right now with the driver behind the wheel. They are Waymo and Zoox. They are seeking level 4 authorization. People usually talk about 5 levels of autonomy. Level 4 is fully autonomous within certain restricted domains. That can be geofenced within a certain geographic area or under certain conditions. Level 5 would be fully autonomous under any conditions. And so far as I know, there are no companies that are deploying at level 5 at this moment. Now, there was some legislation, I don't mention this on the slide, that former council member Kenyon McDuffie dropped last year. That did not move forward. It needed refinements that are now present in legislation introduced by council member Charles Allen, whom we'll hear from in a moment, just very recently. That legislation waited for the release of a DDOT research report on the state of automated vehicle policy that came out in April. So that's some very quick background here. And I'm going to end the poll as we move along so that we can share the results and you can see what people said in response to the poll. So I'm going to stop my screen share here, and I'm hoping that you are seeing the poll results. And meanwhile, we will move to Councilmember Allen. By way of introduction, I'm just going to reshare a slide that illustrates the bill as you can find it on the dccouncil.gov website. The bill is B26-0684. B26 is the year of introduction bill, Autonomous Vehicle Deployment Authorization Amendment Act of 2026. So we're very pleased that Councilmember Allen, whom, as I mentioned, chairs the council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment, is with us here this evening to talk about the background to the legislation, about the issues that he has sought to address with the legislation, and your opportunities to weigh in on the legislation. So I'm going to stop the share and turn the platform over to Councilmember Allen.
All right, Seth, thanks so much. And good evening to everybody. Thanks so much for having me. I've also got Kevin Whitfield, my committee director, who's here as well. So between the two of us, we'll do our very best to help answer any questions that we've got. So like you said, Seth, I'll try to walk through, just spend a few minutes kind of talking about the bill, a little bit of how we got where we are, kind of some of our next steps, and certainly look forward to the conversation and answering what I can tonight. I will flag for everybody right off the top. We are holding a hearing on this bill on Monday, July 13th. And so we encourage everybody to sign up, testify. If you're unable to testify, send us your feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. That's helpful feedback for us. So I think folks have kind of heard me talk about, in terms of when we think about autonomous vehicles, I don't want the district to be the first, but I don't necessarily want us to be the last. And so what we try to do is look at other cities, look at other jurisdictions, learn from what different experiences are, and then craft something that we think fits for the district. I think the number of autonomous vehicles that just exist and the way we're seeing that technology move, it does present an opportunity that can work to help improve traffic safety and consumer choice in the district if it's done right. We'll certainly hear autonomous vehicle proponents will tout AV's traffic safety record, claiming AVs are already safer than the average human driver and continuously improving. There are also issues around equitable access to rideshare services. Could the AVs be a way that we can help better accommodate people with disabilities, or geographically, where right now your wait time in Ward 7 or 8 for an Uber or a Lyft might be a lot longer than if you're in the center of the city or in a different neighborhood. So we've had a lot of engagement from a good number of folks around this issue. We've also had, of course, legitimate concerns around AV adoption, what that looks like. The deployment of autonomous vehicles on district roadways could exacerbate traffic congestion. It could increase demand for limited curbside spaces. It could draw riders away from public transit. We also heard, as we worked with a lot of our trial lawyer community, how do we help manage what that risk could be? And how would you help hold accountable when a collision, if damages occurs? You're going to have commercial AV operation that's going to compete with existing taxi, rideshare, delivery workers, which will, not potentially, but will displace some workers. And so we have to be very thoughtful around that. Obviously, crashes and traffic violations involving autonomous vehicles could present or will present for the district kind of novel questions. Who's responsible for that collision, resulting civil or legal liability? How do we help answer that? Is it the owner of the vehicle? Is it the programmer on the back end? Is it the company that owns it? A lot of liability questions that we wanted to spend some time working through before we introduced a bill. And then, of course, some people are just simply skeptical that autonomous vehicles are going to improve traffic safety based on recent incidents. There was one today, a fatality in Texas that involved a Tesla. Other notable incidents have included the power outage in San Francisco many people have seen, or reports of autonomous vehicles that drove into floodwaters in Texas. So there have to be, and there should be, skepticism around exactly how this works. Currently, the district, as Seth kind of outlined, only allows autonomous vehicles to engage in testing with a test operator, that means a person, physically present in the vehicle. DDOT has been tasked with developing a driverless testing permit for years now, but I'll be honest, progress has stalled. I've held multiple hearings to the council over this, or on this topic over the last couple of years. The legislation that we introduced, though, would pave the way and create a pathway for deployment of commercial autonomous vehicles through a fairly iterative process. I talked about the physical operator in the vehicle. I'll say I also wanted firsthand to be able to experience what it was like. I took a Waymo ride many months ago, had a human operator in it. And my own experience, I saw both the challenges that I think I hear, the skepticism, but I also saw some of the opportunity. For example, when we were riding in the Waymo, we got stuck at an intersection where it's a challenging intersection at Massachusetts Avenue. It was a hard left. It was more than a 90-degree angle. And the vehicle just sat and sat and sat until the operator put his hands on the steering wheel and actually took the turn. And I remarked at the time, did the car make that turn? And they said, no, it couldn't figure it out. So there was an opportunity there where I saw it didn't work the way that people had promised, that it could just navigate the street safely. On the flip side, on the same ride, on the way back, we pulled into an intersection, or we didn't pull into, we stopped at a light. Other people pulled into the intersection, blocking the box, and there was a car behind us. Driver just laying on the horn behind us because we wouldn't pull ahead. Well, the reason we didn't pull ahead, or why the vehicle didn't pull ahead, the box wasn't clear, the crosswalk ahead wasn't clear, and it wasn't bothered about the Maryland driver honking on the horn because it was waiting for that traffic safety. So I saw in that experience both some of the upsides of safer operations that could take place, but I also saw the vehicle not be able to operate exactly the way it promised. So to me, all the more reason for this cautious and iterative approach as we continue to build towards this. So very quickly, let me walk through the bill. It establishes a commercial autonomous vehicle program, like I talked about, with DDOT to have commercial AV permits. So any applicant that would come to DDOT would have to have a record of safe testing. It's got to have, for example, a first responder interaction plan to make sure that law enforcement and emergency personnel are trained and can safely interact with them on the road, as well as a continuity of operations plan. This is important after we looked at the power outage in San Francisco. So we tried to look at other experiences and jurisdictions to craft the legislation around that. It also creates a phased timeline for the deployment of commercial AVs. So the bill sets deadlines by which DDOT must begin offering a driverless testing permit program, but it also lays out how that fleet size grows over time so that we have the checks on it as we continue to grow and expand what this could look like. It also establishes clear rules for when autonomous driving system can be engaged. So the bill broadly allows for the use of level 1 and level 2 autonomous driving systems, which are driver assistance systems, still require the human driver in control. Then the bill generally restricts the use of levels 3, 4, and 5 systems, except when an operator has received that permit for either commercial operations or for testing. What this does, it helps ensure the district's aware of the vehicles with semi or fully autonomous driving systems. And manufacturers of level 3, 4, and 5 systems also have to register with Department of Transportation. One of the things we wanted to work on around concerns around congestion is we established a vehicle miles traveled tax. So the bill establishes this VMT tax for AV operators. It encourages that way the operators to minimize passengerless operations and just circuitous routing. One of the concerns is how do we help address deadheading? And one of the ways is a VMT, I think, can be part of the solution on that. Part of the bill also invests in our public transit system. So it takes a significant portion of the revenue collected from AV operations and puts it back into our public transit infrastructure and service improvements. The bill also encourages AV operators to collaborate with WMATA to develop a system that would offer a discount fare for AV rides that connect to public transit. We'll be very careful here, connect to public transit. I've definitely seen some data where AV operators brag about how a certain number of their rides are connecting to transit. What they really mean is you're going to a transit node. So just because you pick an AV to Cap One Arena to go catch a game doesn't mean you actually get on the metro underneath it. So the data can be parsed, and so I'd want it to be very clear about that connection. I talked earlier as well, there will be a workforce impact on this. I don't think we should shy away from that and make sure we're very clear about it. So the bill requires DDOT, in collaboration with Department of For-Hire Vehicles and Department of Employment Services, to publish a report analyzing the impact of AV deployment on taxis and rideshare in that industry. And then it invests a significant remaining portion of the revenue collected from AV operations into helping that workforce. That could be everything from education, it could be vocational training, workforce development. And then lastly, it also clarifies how existing traffic safety laws and liability rules have to apply to autonomous vehicles. So the bill provides guidance for when a human driver or the autonomous driving system should be considered the driver for the purposes of liability, tailored to the vehicle's level of automation. That clarification is really important to help litigants avoid lengthy product liability disputes. Again, we worked very closely with a large number of stakeholders in crafting this legislation, but I've also heard really great feedback already from even more stakeholders about exactly how we will make changes to it if we're able to move forward with this legislation. Again, at the hearing, I encourage everybody who wants to please testify or send us your comments on the bill. That helps us be very informed as we go at this issue. So I think that's probably I burned up all my time there, Seth. So I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for questions and discussion. But that is a quick overview of the legislation that's in front of us, and happy to answer questions from you or others at the appropriate time.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. We do have time for a couple of clarifying questions. People will be able to, the whole purpose of this program is in a few minutes to present your points of view about the legislation and autonomous vehicles if you have particular concerns. If you have any clarifying questions about the legislation, now is the time to ask them. You can use the Zoom Q&A feature to do that, and then we can read the questions off the Q&A. So we'll give you a few seconds to do that and see if any questions come up via the Q&A. But we can come back to Councilmember Allen also and then move on with our program. Actually, why don't we go ahead and do that? Thank you to Councilmember Charles Allen. And I'm going to continue us with, sorry, I have too many windows open, as you can probably imagine. Continue us with the presentation of positions, perspectives by the Transportation Safety Allies. And we're going to start with Alex Baca.
Sorry, Seth. I think we need to let Director Rogers make his remarks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have I'm kind of screwing up here. I don't have my agenda open in front of me. I couldn't find it. Director Rogers from the Department of For-Hire Vehicles, will you please enable your own video and audio, and we'd love to have you present your perspectives.
Sure. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I'll squeeze in anywhere. So thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I see some familiar names in the chat and on the screen. So happy to be here to talk about such an important and kind of new issue. For those who don't know me, my name is Jonathan Rogers. I'm the director of the Department of For-Hire Vehicles. Our agency regulates taxis and Uber and Lyft and also even the delivery companies now, which we call carriers for hire. So if you don't know about DFHV, that's what we do. But I've been working in the district for a while, and I even used to work at DDOT on Vision Zero. So definitely appreciate the safety perspective we're all thinking about here, first and foremost. And I'm really pleased to see that perspective in the proposed legislation. I know Charles Allen is a big Vision Zero supporter as well. So just briefly, I don't want to be too redundant in the topics I touch on that the council member just did, but our mission at DFHV is safety, accessibility, and affordability, and that applies to the passenger service we're talking about with AVs, but also the deliveries, because AVs are active in both of those activities now. So that's always the lens we see these issues through. And I think when we talk about the potential, I called myself maybe cautiously optimistic in the poll. It wasn't one of the choices, but that's what I would say, because I think I'm coming from a similar perspective where we do see the potential to solve real problems, to improve on safety, mobility, accessibility, affordability, all those things. But I think the burden of proving those safe operations is on these operators. And so I really agree with this graduated approach for growth, whether that's in terms of fleet size or operating on local streets versus highways, those sorts of things. I did a demo as well in a Waymo, maybe last summer actually, with a human who wasn't touching the wheel. And so I had a kind of similar observations. We actually did a demo with Olivia Norman, who is on our Accessibility Advisory Council. And so we had a few different issues. I think the challenges were around the service animal she used, and the fact that the vehicle really wasn't able to pull completely to the curb, as is no shocker to anyone that there wasn't just an open parking space at the curb available. And so she actually had to kind of navigate out into the street a bit to get in the vehicle, and there was no driver to sort of escort her to do that. And then I think on the flip side, it was just kind of enlightening to see the screen in the Waymo and the vantage point it has with its LiDAR and radar and cameras, and kind of has a viewpoint that a human really can't achieve sitting in the driver's seat. So some pros and cons, I think. So just commenting on, I think some of the aspects like we would like to see in the details of what gets rolled out. I think in any of the phases of deployment, again, we want to prioritize equity and accessibility. And from what I've seen, I think new operators like this, they often want to start off with what's convenient for them. And so that isn't necessarily supporting like geographic equity of service, or increasing the supply of wheelchair accessible vehicles, which is a big priority for us. So I think trying to be bold in what we require on that front would be wise. And then, as the council member mentioned, I think it's important to think about the impacts to the local transportation businesses and current employees in the industry, because there's an obvious shift that's going to happen there, whether you're drivers or even some of our local business owners with our taxi companies. There's going to be a big shift there. So want to ensure that we're minimizing any negative impact there. And then just the last thing I'll say to wrap up is perhaps a bit of a biased opinion, but at DFHV, we think we're the experts on regulating for-hire service. And so, we would like to maintain that prominent role and sort of apply all the expertise we do have in regulating the operators who are already here. It's pretty likely from what we've heard from these companies that we're going to see hybrid models where they continue to operate with human drivers and an autonomous fleet, and so we have a lot of years of experience with accountability with these companies and holding them to reporting requirements to make sure they're following the rules and the laws and delivering on those goals that I mentioned. So that I'll just leave it at that for DFHV, and also happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, let's take two questions. I think they'll be quick, that were entered in the Q&A for you or for Councilmember Allen. Commissioner Monica Martinez Lopez asks, is there a ballpark number for the number of AVs deployed in the first 6 to 12 months? and or a minimum max number in the initial fleet?
Be hard to answer in the first 6 to 9 months. I assume what you mean by that is once they actually get approval to operate. So legislation sets and basically essentially steps that up. I might turn to Kevin if he's got that number right in front of him so I don't misstate it.
I believe it's 200, but I'll confirm right now.
200, I believe, is what it is. So the fleet size per permit would be up to 200 as at what they would be capped at as the starting place. But we can double check to make sure that number of the legislation. And we've already heard feedback of some people that say it should be higher, it should be lower. Again, that's the point of a hearing is for us to get that type of feedback too.
Okay,
And
and
it
then
is 200 is the initial cap.
so then a pair of sort of linked questions. Ratchet asks, 50% of transit feels low compared to similar policies, that is of revenues. And then Bill Pugh asks, question on the bill, how will the generated funds to support public transit infrastructure and service be used? How will that be decided?
So on the second question first, so what the legislation does is it creates a dedicated fund so that revenue comes into that. It then gets split between public transit investments with WMATA and then this workforce fund. And we don't legislatively in statute put every single specific detail of how those dollars would be spent. The idea would be working with Department of For-Hire Vehicles, DOES, working with others to shape and say what would be the most effective use of those dollars and how. So, from a legislative strategy, sometimes you can be overly prescriptive and you maybe don't have the benefit of hearing some of the different ideas or feedback from workers themselves about what would be the most beneficial. So we didn't want to be overly prescriptive with that as a starting point. And then Seth, sorry, what was the first question?
That 50% of transit revenue feels low compared to similar policies, for example, Proposition L in San Francisco, and funds go to DDOT instead of directly to WMATA. Why?
I'm not aware of any other city where AV revenues are going to public transit. So I think it's pretty significant that we're able to do this. We're also having costs that are much higher than what you'll see in any other city because we want to generate that revenue for these programs. So in terms of the way that I think if the question is just how do we flow money from our budgeting purposes to WMATA, I believe that's just the mechanism by which we flow the money to our public transit rather than just handing it directly to WMATA. Does that sound right, Kevin?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Member, Council Member, and Director. We're going to move to the perspectives of the Transportation Safety Allies, the co-hosts for this evening's program. We'll start with Christy Kwan from DC Families for Safe Streets and then have Alex Baca from Gregory Washington up next. So I'll turn it over to Christy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Kwan. I serve as the volunteer co-chair for the DC chapter of Families for Safe Streets. I'm grateful for this forum tonight, our co-hosts, and all of the attendees. For folks who don't know, DC Families for Safe Streets is comprised of people who have lost loved ones, been injured, or care for someone who is injured in traffic violence. I've heard from many of our members here in DC where our comfort level of AVs truly spans the entire spectrum. Just as we saw tonight in the poll, side note, I thought it was very interesting that no one chose that they were indifferent. So people have strong feelings on either end. But I will say with thinking about autonomous vehicles and robotaxis, in conversations with other organizations and advocates here and in beyond DC, it was highly recommended to me for our chapter to focus on what we're best suited to respond to, and that is traffic safety. And so I think that's how you'll kind of see us approach this bill, especially as we dive in the next coming weeks before the hearing on June 13th. I do want to note that tomorrow, Families for Safe Streets National is releasing their position paper on AVs, which they've been working on for the past year and a half. Our chapter will apply those learnings to ensure that the proposed legislation here in DC makes safety gains and is never worse than what currently exists, which is already very concerning, especially those who have experienced crashes here in DC and elsewhere. But I do want to mention how Families for Safe Streets National is putting it. The central question is not whether autonomous vehicles will exist, but it's about what form they will take, how safe will they be, whose interests they will prioritize, and whether they will strengthen or undermine a broad set of public needs. I will share that I'm personally like on the uncomfortable side, but I understand that position that the question is not if AVs will exist. I mean, they're already here, they're already in operation in other cities. I think we need to kind of accept that reality and figure out those other parts of how do we weigh in to make sure this bill is strong and make sure that people are safe here in DC. So in the coming weeks, we will review the bill more closely and prepare testimony on how the council and district regulators can ensure the program here is centered on human life, safety, accountability, and transparency. We're happy to work with other organizations and anyone directly impacted by traffic violence as we prepare our testimony. We are actually having our chapter meeting tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. via Zoom. You can feel free to email us if you're interested in attending. In the chat, I'll drop a link to that webinar tomorrow from Families for Safe Streets National, as well as how to get in contact with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Christy. We'll now call on Alex Baca from Gregory, Washington.
Hi. Okay, there we go. I have unblurred. Seth, thanks so much for having me this evening. I'm working with some noisy background, so if something comes up, let me know. But otherwise, happy to be here. My name is Alex Baca. I'm the DC Policy Director at Greater Washington. We work on housing, transportation, and land use in DC and Maryland. The bill's fine. AVs will be here. It's good to have a framework to start to regulate them. I was hoping that I would be joining this call with a little more enthusiasm, but the Committee on Transportation and the Environment failed today to fund additional research on congestion mitigation and the impacts of AVs in the budget. And I am gravely disappointed in Councilmember Allen. So while we are generally closely aligned with T&E and what they're up to, the lack of this more expansive research on what we need to do to mitigate the impacts of AVs is going to make it very challenging for us to participate strongly in the AV legislation. AVs are just cars. And so far, the district has really failed to mitigate the impacts of single occupancy vehicles, just for-hire vehicles, despite the willingness of agencies to participate in that. So, people know us as congestion pricing advocates. I think we had a big win earlier this year in getting the mayor to finally release a study that is woefully out of date. But that was really, the existence of that study was downstream of an earlier study on autonomous vehicles calling for congestion pricing as a way to mitigate some of the deleterious impacts that can be associated with deadheading, idling, longer trips, that sort of thing. So we say internally at work, and I say socially, that AVs are just cars, right? They take up the same amount of space. They're likely to move slower. It's great that you personally don't need to be driving them and that another person doesn't need to be driving them either. Perhaps I have outstanding questions about safety for sure, but they're going to happen. And what we need to have is an orderly public space that reduces harm for people on foot, on bike, on mobility devices. And I don't think that we are well equipped to have that. We had an opportunity to sort of expand we had an opportunity to expand our knowledge about what we could do to mitigate the impacts of AVs, as well as raise additional revenue. I love that there is a VMT tax in this bill. I do not think it is sufficient. I do not think it will raise substantial revenue. And I also don't think that it will reduce trips by car, which is our ultimate goal at GG Wash. So I I would say that we're not in the place that I was really hoping that we were going to be for this event this evening. I was hoping that I could speak positively about an influx of information coming from the council about potential revenue raisers, about potential mitigation strategies in advance of the autonomous vehicle bill. We'll testify that we don't support the bill as written and look forward to constructive solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. We'll call next on Callie Crumpos, who is the Advocacy Director at the Washington Area Bicyclist Association.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here with us. For folks that know WABA, we're the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. We're working to achieve a just and sustainable transportation system where walking, biking, and transit are the best ways to get around. That means that we believe that streets should be for people. That should meet our needs to make streets safe enough, convenient enough, and welcoming enough to get around when you're on a bike, when you're walking and rolling, and when you're taking transit. But at the same time, we understand there's still a need for vehicles to be a transportation option. And we're supportive of safer vehicles and cars that can't be distracted by drivers on their phones, that are not programmed to speed, that can't run red lights or park in bike lanes or block crosswalks. And I know that we are also tracking some problematic reports of rideshare drivers committing sexual assault. So I think we're really thinking about what is the experience of people and how do we get around with safety as a key concern for people in our transportation environment, on our streets, and for people in vehicles as well. As DC considers this bill, we think that our policymakers and regulators should be undertaking a rigorous and holistic analysis of how the technology will affect the broader region and our broader transportation system. We think that we should require transparency and reporting from the companies, and we encourage the consideration of how we can move our transportation system forward to ensure that streets continue to be, or that we can move towards streets for people, regardless of how we get around. I'll post a link in the chat for a fuller statement about WABA's position, and did also just want to call out that Waymo is a sponsor of WABA. However, sponsors don't have any say in our advocacy positions.
Thank you, Callie. We'll next call on Kelly Mack from the DC Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. I represent the DC Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council, which is a mayorally appointed group that advises DC government on improving transportation accessibility for people with disabilities. I myself am a DC resident and a power wheelchair user. Like many disabled people, I rely on publicly available transportation options, including taxis, which are often unreliable and unavailable for wheelchair users like myself. In general, many disabled people are very interested in AVs because of persistent transportation inaccessibility issues. The potential is great, but only if accessibility is required from the start. The MAC recently sent a letter to DC Council advising that any legislation permitting AV deployment must specifically mandate accessibility. 4 requirements must be added to legislation permitting AV deployment to ensure accessibility for disabled riders. 1, that the vehicles are wheelchair accessible for loading and securement. 2, that the vehicles can communicate and be controlled by riders simply and effectively in multiple ways. 3, that it can detect and interact with disabled pedestrians as appropriate. And 4, that it protects the safety of both riders and pedestrians with disabilities, including people of color. History shows us that failing to robustly require transportation accessibility results in segregated, inaccessible, and inequitable services that deny people with disabilities a fundamental freedom. that of moving about freely in their community. Strong leadership is needed now to ensure this does not happen yet again with the deployment of AVs. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelly. We'll hear now for a moment from Kara Haney from the Institute for Safer Trucking.
Kara, you're on mute.
Thank you. So that was a mouthful. I'm Kara with the Institute for Safer Trucking and Road Safe America. We raise awareness and educate the public about truck safety solutions. We support families impacted by crashes, and we collaborate with stakeholders to advance safety on our roads. I am pleased to be here to learn more, and we will continue to follow the development of this bill with great interest.
Thank you, Kara. It's great to work with you all. And then the final member of the Transportation Safety Allies who will speak this evening is Drew Laframboise from the Trial Lawyers Association of Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Seth. Good evening, everyone. My name is Drew Laframboise, and I am the president of the Trial Lawyers Association of Metropolitan Washington, D.C., as Seth said. Thank you to WABA for hosting this webinar, and to our co-hosts and our allies for their partnership on this and other critical public safety issues in the district, and to Councilmember Allen for your forward thinking and your thoroughness in introducing this legislation and taking this important first step. Our membership consists of attorneys who represent people injured in the District of Columbia, including those who are victims of car crashes. As an organization, we are focused on enhancing public safety in the district, including on our streets and our roadways, and ensuring access to civil justice for those who are harmed due to the negligence and the wrongdoing of others. To frame this issue from our perspective, autonomous vehicles are coming, and they're likely coming soon. And as a result, the district needs responsible public policy that ensures that people who are wronged or harmed by this new technology have access to justice and an opportunity for legal redress that is responsive to those harms. Integral to this conversation is the understanding that autonomous vehicles are inseparable from the companies that design, manufacture, sell, and operate them. When an individual drives a car, they're responsible for the decisions they make. When a corporation builds and programs an autonomous car, who's ultimately responsible for ensuring that it operates safely, and who's responsible for the harm caused when the autonomous vehicle behaves dangerously? The company is. The company's responsible. And this draft legislation effectively answers the question of who is responsible from a legal perspective in the event of an AV-caused crash, who is considered a driver, and what recourse should be available to those who are harmed in the event of an AV-caused crash. The draft legislation ensures that the AV company, and not the district's taxpayers and healthcare providers, will bear the financial burden created by an AV-caused crash. Can the bill be improved? Of course. And the Trial Lawyers Association hopes to provide a constructive voice and viewpoint as we all continue to think through the implications of this new technology on our streets, and as we all work together and collaboratively to improve the draft legislation. Thank you all for being here tonight and for providing your feedback and your questions so that we can continue to work on this critical issue and work toward a safer DC. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Drew. So we're going to move into a listening phase now, where we invite the participants, the attendees, I should say, to speak. We ask you to use the Zoom raise hand feature to be called on, and we will promote you to panelist for your comment. That means you'll be on video and on audio. We'd give you up to 2 minutes. We ask you, because of the number of people who may want to speak, to keep your comments brief and to the point. Please do start by sharing your name and any relevant organizational affiliations. Again, keep your remarks focused and respectful. This is a time for sharing your views. It is not a time for debate. There'll be plenty of time for that down the line. As an alternative, as people have been doing already, you may make comments via chat. If time allows, and I'm guessing it really won't, we'll allow for clarifying questions via the Q&A. And a reminder once again that the DC Council will have testimony on July the 13th. I have a link later in the slides for you to sign up to do that. So we're going to move to chat now. I'm sorry, to comments now. And let's see if anyone has raised hand. I need to pull up participants, and I see 3 attendees. So we're going to start with Patrick Bloomstein, and I'm going to promote you to panelist. After that, we'll have David Alexander, August, and then Steve's iPad, whoever that is. So Patrick Bloomstein, we'll turn it over to you. No more than 2 minutes, please.
Hi, can you hear me? It booted me out initially.
Yes, you're good. You're good.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Seth. Hi, I'm Patrick Bloomstein. I'm the chair of the Transportation and Public Space Committee for ANC 6A, but my thoughts here are my own, and I've been a WABA member for 6 or so years, and I have a lot of concerns on this that I think Alex expressed with regard to autonomous vehicles, and I really have had these issues just with them being tested on our public streets. These companies really want to have them have these vehicles on the streets. They should have to build their own testing facility to hone them. And it's kind of upsetting to see them around. And as mentioned, I mentioned in the comments, they can't be bothered to program out that pickup and drop off should not be happening in the bike lane. They have stated time and again that that's just where it happens. So if they're going to they're going to willfully acknowledge that they are not going to obey basic traffic laws like that, then I don't see the need for them to be on our streets. And then I also had an issue. People talk a lot about damages, and in some of the policy statements saw they talk about injuries. And one of the things that isn't brought up is death. And cars have a tendency to drivers and operators of cars have a tendency to kill people. And we haven't really talked about what's going to happen when these autonomous vehicles kill someone. And I'm very concerned about kind of people avoiding that part of the conversation and not saying it in their policy statements. That's all. Thank you. Thank you very much for putting this together. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll move now to David Alexander.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'm David Alexander. I am the Ward 2 Bicycle Advisory Council member. I am speaking for myself only. Please be clear about that. And I'm speaking with the benefit of my ideas forming as I learn more, including from this very useful meeting. So please don't take what I say as my bottom line. But here are my thoughts at the moment. First and foremost, I am emphatically sensitive to the concerns that have been raised about accessibility. As a bicyclist, I do not believe that bicycles are the end all and be all. I emphatically believe they are an essential part of our transportation system. And I say that as a bicyclist in this district for the last 45 years. Things have gotten much better. My overall view, with that said, and I want to say again, accessibility, fairness, and safety, my overall view is that as a bicyclist, I am excited about the possibility of increasing the fleet of vehicles that are programmed to follow the rules, and following the rules regarding red lights, blocking the box, passing, speed, etc., etc. Every bicyclist knows that is the bane of our existence. So I look forward to productive resolution of the issues that have been raised here. And I expect things will get better for all of us as we work through these issues. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David. I don't see any other raised hands at the moment. If anyone would like to speak on camera, please use raise hand. August, I see you there. I will invite you to become oh yes, you're already a panelist, it looks like. So you can go ahead and unmute and turn your video on and go ahead. See you on screen.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So hi, I'm August Remy. I'm an organizer with Metro DC DSA's Transit Working Group. We're very concerned about this bill and about autonomous vehicles coming to DC. As socialists, we support public transit and these sorts of affordable, accessible options for our city that work for working class people. I think a very simple framework to understand our concerns is one of repeating history, right? We've seen this sort of lobbying and this sort of aggressive action before in the rideshare space with Uber in the 2010s. And now we're seeing Uber lobbyists work with Waymo to sort of approach this legislation the same way, right? You talk about problems with accessibility, for example, right? For the longest time, part of Uber's sort of bylines was, we're going to improve accessibility with Uber. And then that didn't go anywhere, right? Or this idea that we're going to make transit more equitable with Uber because apps can't discriminate, right? Unlike taxi drivers, for example. But that ended up being true either, right? We have name-based discrimination, geographical discrimination still with Uber and rideshare. And we're afraid that that same sort of thing is going to happen again with these tech companies that rely on the car-centric system we've built and provide the city with very bad results, unfortunately. As Alex Bacco mentioned, cars are still cars. Autonomous or not, with an app or not, they're still cars. These services will not be affordable for the average DC resident. They may be equitable geographically, but that doesn't mean that people can equally use them throughout DC, right? There are doubts about the accessibility of these services. There are doubts about the safety of these services even and how they'll comply with the law, right? We believe this bill needs significantly more to it. And we strongly support the amendments proposed by by HU 689, who submitted amendments to Councilmember Allen. And yeah, this will be testifying at the July 13th hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, August. We'll hear now from Jennifer Cooper. Jennifer, you can start your video and unmute yourself.
I'm having trouble starting my video.
Well, that's all right. If you want to just continue with audio only, that's fine.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry, I don't have a well thought out statement. For background, my name is Jen Cooper. I used to live in Columbia Heights. Back in 2020, I got hit by a car while as a pedestrian. Got involved with Family for Safe Streets, went back to school, became a nurse, moved to Baltimore. You all have no idea how safe your roads are in comparison to Baltimore, but DC is still my heart. And I care deeply about preventing the rushed, not thought out deployment of autonomous vehicles. And so I have kind of a bullet list that I'd like to read to you. With the bill, the testing timeline seems too short. I see no mention of criminal liability for collisions. I see a lot of financial liability and obeying traffic laws and fines, but I see nothing about criminal liability. The $5 million fee seems very large and doesn't really seem like the kind of money that would encourage companies to care about people with disabilities. And when I talk about disabilities, I mean the 25% most disabled, the people who can't maybe use a smartphone, the people who need door-to-door service, not just curb to curb. It doesn't detail how wheelchairs will be managed. I'm concerned that there's no public comment period. I'm concerned that there's no environmental impact statement. 200 also seems like a large number of vehicles to start with, perhaps a smaller amount. Overall, I think we need fewer cars on the road. And I don't think this should be considered merely safety. I think the economic impact is significant. We know that whenever people are driving Lyft and Uber, they're often the people at the lower economic edge, and pushing them off leads to poor health. So perhaps while we might have fewer vehicle crashes, we might have overall poorer health. Also, I know this is a random thing to say, but we're in an epidemic of loneliness. And when you put someone in a driverless car, that's one fewer opportunity they have to interact with other people. And I don't think that's a thing that we should take lightly. I'm also concerned about what safety protocols there are in the event that an AV is perhaps hacked or hijacked. That has not been discussed at all. How will the average person be able to turn off a malfunctioning AV? I mean, it's great to talk about a plan for emergency people to come and shut off an AV, but like it might need to be shut off faster. I also think that we need to carefully consider that this is kind of at odds with community. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. At present, we cannot safely accommodate existing road users. We don't yet have the infrastructure so that pedestrians, bikes, scooters, cars, buses can safely coexist. How do we plan to accommodate another road user? Finally, I think that we really need to carefully consider this technology, because once we release it onto the roads, we cannot take it back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those comments. We'll call next on Commissioner Chuck Elkins. You can start your video and unmute yourself.
Hi, Joe. Well, first, my apologies to Councilmember Allen. I have not read the bill, so therefore my comments tonight are not informed. But my major concern I bring to this forum tonight is that we will be learning a lot as we go forward with this experiment and this activity, and that we need to be really organized about how we learn and make corrections. And the thing that sort of comes to mind that is sort of a negative message or experience for us is our experience with scooters, in which the Department of Transportation decided what they were going to do about scooters. And then as citizen comments came in, I don't want to be unkind, but the professionals at DDOT decided they knew best and really didn't need to hear very much from the community. I think that in this case, this is a many times bigger issue than scooters. And we really need to set up a system in which ordinary citizens who will be seeing the performance of these vehicles day by day in a way that the people who serve in the government probably will not, to be able to have input and be heard and have that have an impact. And perhaps that's in the bill. So, but I think we need to prepare for that. We need to be in a learning position, and we should allow residents to have some meaningful input, not just sort of send in their comments and that's the end of it. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. And the last person who had hand raised, and I'll invite anyone else to raise hand who wants to speak, is CT Tyson. I do see one more, so after CT, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you. I say this is not prepared, so and just cut me off at the 2 minutes. Thank you. My name is CT Tyson. I am a disabled Ward 4 resident. I lived here on and up for 20-something years. I also am a disability advocate. I work for a national disability nonprofit that's based in the Bay Area, so we have a lot of experience with this advocacy, but also the impacts that the inaccessible AVs can have on the options in our community. Also, this is very personal for me because I became disabled from a traffic crash while I was riding my bike. So just to be honest about that. thank you to Kelly Mack and Jonathan Roger for mentioning and for their commitment to accessibility and equity. And thank you, both of you, for your service and your leadership on all of these issues. I have mentioned in the Q&A that the history in DC and actually nationwide is that we don't see on-demand wheelchair accessible service or service that's accessible for all people with disabilities unless it's either required by law or they're sued. So I was the chair of the Department of For-Hire Vehicles Accessibility Advisory Committee on the committee, and then the chair from 2013 to 2016, which was the years when we were implementing the first requirement for taxis to have wheelchair accessible service, and the years when Uber and Lyft entered the market. So went back and dug up all those files. I want to echo Jonathan's comment that what we're seeing now and the concerns that I have are really the shortcomings of the current rules and regulations that came out of that period. We really fought hard for accessibility and equity, and we did not get most of what we said was really needed for the community. And I fully support raising requirements and evening out the rules. We see and around the country, whenever we have an inaccessible on-demand mode enter our market, the accessible services are really harmed. So drivers who provide wheelchair accessible, but also service to people who aren't disabled may find it harder to make a living, and then we're losing those drivers and those few wheelchair accessible vehicles. We also see a lot of the companies relying, like AVs, relying on wheelchair accessible taxis, but if they can't afford to make a living to provide service to disabled passengers, then it doesn't help. So I just would implore the council member and everybody to advocate for requirements. We had in the years past, in the early days, requirements for the companies, for Uber and Lyft, to provide reports on how they were going to provide accessible service, and those reports were flimsy at best, and I just urge that we have similar reports, but with actual teeth, that require them to provide service, and where you're pushing back, and that DC is actually providing a good model of how to ensure that these companies are going to be operating equitably, providing accessibility and safely as well. And I'm available to provide any and all history, but I know that Kelly and other leaders are here, and I'm just grateful for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing those comments. I'll venture that the advocacy organizations, all of them, understand and want to work on your behalf. That is of people who have special accessibility needs. So we have a comment next from Rashid. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Hi, I'm Rachit. I'm a Ward 2 resident, and I walk and I bike and I drive as well. I have somewhat of a nuanced view here because when I lived in San Francisco, I rode in a Waymo and Cruise self-driving cars. And honestly, it was good. They obeyed the speed limit. They obeyed the traffic laws overall. They didn't run red lights. It was a fairly smooth ride. Better than most, I would say, the very average human driver. However, so I'm not going to pretend that AVs are uniformly worse than humans. However, since that was several years ago. Since then, I think things have gotten a lot worse, where the way these software companies work is they train on what they see, and that's human drivers often breaking the law in order to get to their destination slightly faster. And what that results in is breaking the law. So now you have a lot of more documented cases of Waymos and other self-driving cars, but Waymo is kind of the market leader right now. Blocking bike lanes, running red lights, blocking the box, blocking fire trucks, where firefighters in San Francisco are on the hold with Waymo customer service based in the Philippines, waiting to get a remote operator to get the Waymo out of the fire truck's way. That's unacceptable, and that's the result of bad policy. And I think we can effectively solve for a lot of these things with better policy that puts more burden on these companies to adequately respond to these things. For example, the bill does not set any SLA or response time for if there is an issue and first responders need to act on something that the Waymo like customer service or whatever needs to respond in some particular time. So they're not making those commitments, and that results in a lot of downstream issues. That also has safety impacts when they block bike lanes. I observe a lot of people blocking bike lanes. That's a problem with cars. And I think where I'm more struggling with AVs is that a car is a car, no matter who is driving it, and no matter how many people are in it. And a bus will always be more efficient than a car, or a bike will always be more efficient than a car, or a train will always be more efficient than the car. And we are not sufficiently doing enough to build the infrastructure for better transit and better mobility around the city, whether that's safe street infrastructure that actually slows down every single car, not just driverless cars, infrastructure that expands our metro network, expands our bus network, expands our bike lane network. That takes several years. And so when we try to do something that makes self-driving cars come in super quickly, it detracts from the conversation. It focuses the safety conversation from a car-centric perspective rather than solving the more underlying issues that are more proven around building more protected bike lanes and infrastructure and transit. So I think one way the bill can fix that is adding a lot more taxes to directly go to transit rather than just DDOT then deciding where to put funds. So those are a few of my thoughts on self-driving. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those ideas. There have been lots of great ideas shared this evening. We're going to invite Councilmember Allen to come back on video to see whether he wants to provide any sort of response to the comments that have been made so far, and then to reiterate what the process is going to be going forward.
Yeah, Seth, happy to do that. I think you have to allow me to come off camera.
Didn't know that was a problem.
I think you may have disabled the camera earlier, so it says that you've got to do it. There we go. All right. Well, thank you, Seth, and everybody tonight. First off, just again, my appreciation for everybody. A couple of quick thoughts, and then again, I want to encourage everybody to join us at the hearing or submit testimony if you can't actually be there in person. I think as we've kind of heard through the different comments over the course of the evening, and I think Christy was the first one who noted this in the poll, very few people are just indifferent to this. So there's a lot of really great thoughts, a lot of really strong thoughts, a lot of really good feedback, and I'm grateful for it. As we heard kind of our last speaker, Rachit, kind of talk about, there's a lot of nuance to this too. This is definitely a space where you can see two things true at the same time, where there are parts that we might look at and say, okay, I see some benefits here and I see some negatives here. And that's why this has not been a rushed process. We typically get the criticism that it's being very slow, actually. So being very deliberate in working our way through this, holding the hearings, taking the time to study and learn from other jurisdictions. I do not want to be a city that chases the shiny ball. I want to be one that tries to say, what are the problems we're trying to solve? And can we use policies to be able to help do that? Commissioner Elkins said he hadn't had a chance to read the legislation yet. And I know as I heard some of the different questions or comments along the way, it sounds like some folks still have questions about what's actually in the proposed bill. For example, the legislation does not give the money to DDOT just to do what they want. It is a public transit investment there. But great point, for example, around the SOA on a disabled vehicle. The legislation requires reporting around what that would be, but doesn't mandate legislatively in statute what that time has to be. Typically, we don't actually legislate that type of detail. But again, that's what the hearing is for, is to get that type of feedback. And I love nuance, so happy to kind of dig into those different details. The other thing I'll add is that we have been pushing on Department of Transportation to complete and finish a report and analysis that'll help inform and guide this. Not my first rodeo with a hearing. And so what I very likely think will happen is that DDOT, the day before the hearing, or maybe that morning, will magically complete their report. And that will help inform and be able to have that type of research and information that then can help plug into the work that we want to be able to do and help incorporate that feedback into the legislation that moves forward. But again, I want to encourage everybody to come. testify. If you're unable to testify in person, again, please submit your testimony. And there's a lot of other great organizations that are providing very specific recommendations and feedback. I think August had mentioned ATU has a set of recommendations. I sat down and met with them a few weeks back. Very good ideas around recommendations for legislation. So as you work with other allies and other organizations, look for what some of those recommendations are. If you like what they're recommending, let us know that. Echo what they're suggesting. Or if you disagree with something, that's helpful as well. And the legislative process, I've been around long enough to make the sausage. The bill will change from the introduced version to what ultimately may move forward. So we want your feedback. Please know that I'm looking for that type of feedback, both in the hearings or outside of that. So I look forward to the continued conversation. And again, Seth, and to all the coalition partners that helped pull this conversation together tonight, I really appreciate that. And for each of you taking the time out to give your ideas and thoughts on this so far.
Thank you once again. We really appreciate your participating this evening. Also, everyone who commented, this was very informative. We will be distributing, sending out a message with the slides. I'm about to share one particular slide that shows some resources that you may find helpful. Links that you may find helpful. And then by way of conclusion, we'll ask you to send your feedback to the Transportation Safety Allies, the organizations that are shown here. Each organization, I hope, will share their contact information via the chat right this moment, but we will also share the contact information for the hosting organizations in the follow-up message. As Councilmember Allen said, sign up to testify, or you can submit written testimony for the public hearing. Of course, the committee is much more than just Councilmember Allen. And then you can also contact the council member for your DC ward and the at-large council members. This is an important issue. So we're going to wrap it up with this. I didn't see that Callie put the GWABA contact information in, so I will do that. And we would love to hear from you. But once again, we'll send a follow-up message to everyone who registered for this evening's program with information about how to follow up and next steps and the resources via a link to the slide set. And we will post the recording and get that out as well for people who couldn't attend. So once again, thank you very much for attending, and I hope this has been informative.